Dr. Dilek, welcome to Tibet TV's weekly analysis. As the saying goes, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. In this case, Tibet, as we know, is sandwiched between India and China. Also, Tibet as a buffer zone and roof of the world plays a key role in Asia's stability and downstream countries that are dependent on waters coming from Tibet. Today, there is a growing interest among Indians towards Tibet studies, and this can have huge contribution back to India. To understand more on the importance of Tibet studies, I'm joined by Professor Sonika Gupta-ji from IIT Madras, whose research areas cover Tibetan community in exile. Welcome to Tibet TV, Professor Sonika Gupta-ji.
Thank you, Ashila, and thank you for inviting me to Tibet TV.
Ma'am, my first question is, you as a scholar, what made you interested in Tibet studies, and when and how did this interest spark?
I have been a student of international relations for the past 20 years or so. And in this time, the one thing I have observed is a lack of a informed and engaged study of Tibet in India beyond very narrow interest in Tibet. The two of the areas in which many Indians have studied Tibet and continue to study Tibet is the study of Buddhism. And in the contemporary times, it's largely confined to looking at Tibet as a factor in India-China relations. And I have felt that we need to move beyond these two existing focus on Tibet to building a more robust, historically sound, and better informed Tibet studies programs in India. So my interest in promoting research on Tibet largely actually comes from the lack of it in existing institutions in India.
Ma'am, we all know that Tibet studies is a vast subject. You also hold two different views on this study. So now my question is, what areas of Tibet studies cover in IIT Madras?
So at IIT Madras, we currently have a doctoral group that's looking at different facets of Tibet, Tibetan politics, as well as issues of democratization of the exile government, citizenship issues. We're looking at Tibetan activism. We're looking at experiences of Tibetans in exile as identity issues, as well as hoping to expand the program to a study of Tibetans in Himalayan borderlands of India.
Ma'am, as you are aware that His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's fourth commitment is revival of ancient Indian wisdom. So on this perspective, how relevant do you think the importance of Tibet studies for Indians to work on above said commitment?
I think this is an issue in which India as a country has the most relevance. His Holiness has been in India for over 60 years now, and there is quite beyond the contemporary period, there is a very long history of mutual enrichment of knowledge between India and Tibet. There has been recorded instances of what is largely referred to popularly as Indian Pandits going to Tibet to explore and to immerse themselves in the ancient wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, in 1893, Sarat Chandra Bose had written a book chronicling the experiences of many such scholars who had carried out travels in Tibet, specifically with the aim of accessing ancient wisdom of Tibet. And this book is called Indian Pandits in the Land of the Snow. And it was published by the Asiatic Society of Bengal. Similarly, the life and work of Rahul Sankritayan, then Tibetan masters like Gendun Chofel, who came to India. This history is a history which has laid a very strong foundation for Indians as well as Tibetans to cooperate in a study of reviving ancient wisdom, ancient knowledge in both the regions, in both the countries. And this is something I think that needs better institutionalization in the current period.
Ma'am, you have written many articles on Tibet. So, when you see today's Sino-Indian geopolitical scenario, what possible roles could Tibet play in solving the ongoing tension between these two giant nations?
Well, the ongoing tension is because Tibet is the primary issue in South Asian geopolitics. I mean, the unsettled border between India and China is essentially a border between India and Tibet. And I think it's very crucial to recognize this fact that till the Tibetan issue is settled to the satisfaction of the Tibetan people, there is likely to be continued contention between India and China on multiple geopolitical issues. Quite apart from this, for the past at least 2 decades, we are seeing increasingly very alarming levels of environmental degradation in Tibet. And I think both India and China have to realize that, that it is quite past now the time that they have to evolve some cooperative strategies to address this environmental degradation and definitely not contribute to it. The mass mobilization of armies on the along the borders of India and Tibet, the increasing deployments along the borders, as well as the kind of policies that the Chinese government is carrying out on the Tibetan plateau with regard to the degradation of the grasslands. These are things that cause very urgent concern in downstream countries in South Asia. So Tibet is not just an issue between India and China in that sense. Tibet is an issue of environmental protection for the entire Indian subcontinent.
Ma'am, when we look at Western universities, there are lots of Tibet Studies centers. But when we look at India, there is a very few Tibet Studies centers. So my question is, what do you think is the main reason behind this vacuum?
Yeah, you're correct in saying this, that there are very few. In fact, I don't know of any university in India that has a Tibet Studies program. I think we have scattered courses on Tibet, but an entire full-fledged Tibet Studies program with expertise from history, anthropology, geopolitics, sociology, economics. I don't think we have any of that in any Indian university. And that is a question worth pondering on. Because the Tibetan exile community has been in India for the past 60 years. The Tibetan government in exile, or the CTA, has been in India for the same amount of time. And India has supported the Tibetan population in India through the settlements, through schools where Tibetan history is taught, Tibetan language is taught, but that has not translated into research programs on Tibet studies. And if you look at some of the most well-informed and well-researched Tibet academic work on Tibet, it comes from geographers or from anthropologists or historians outside of India. So this is the lack that I spoke about in the beginning when we began talking, that this is a cause for concern, I think, both for India as well as the CTA, that India, as the location of the largest percentage of the exile population, as the location of the CTA, as the location of His Holiness, should have better institutionalized mechanisms for study of Tibet. Why it has not happened? My understanding of this is there is a lack of curiosity on the part of India regarding Tibet, especially in the last 50, 60 years, beyond just looking at Tibet as an issue in India-China relations. And I think we need to address this.
Ma'am, do you see any alternate ways to bring more Tibet study centers in Indian universities?
I think we definitely need it. And one of the first things we need to do, if we want to encourage a sound study of Tibet that translates into robust research is better infrastructure and better opportunities for learning the Tibetan language beyond what already exists, offered by the CTA and offered by other institutions of His Holiness. And it needs to move beyond the institutional structures where it currently is into the university systems. And the other thing I think we need to do is to teach Tibetan history as part of our history programs. And I don't see that in any, at least in any undergraduate level programs in India. Tibet as a civilization is often covered in fairly superficial manner, in a fairly populist manner. I think we need more critical studies of Tibet within our university systems.
Ma'am, we are living in an age of social media. One of the most prominent social media platforms is Twitter, and you are handling a Twitter channel called @Tibetscapes, which covers some important issues pertaining to Tibet studies. So my question is, why did you start this Twitter channel?
So the doctoral group at IIT Madras is the group, we have called it Tibetscapes. And the idea behind starting Tibetscapes was actually to document our research journeys as we built our research program on Tibet. And we started with a research blog on WordPress, and we have different social media handles across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to disseminate this research. And Twitter has been specifically very valuable in building our connections with the wider Tibetan studies community across the world in different countries. And within a year, we have got the attention of Tibet scholars in many prominent universities in the world. And it has enriched our own work, and it has allowed us to present, to access the work of Tibetan scholars. So this is a very valuable interaction for the students who are doing research on Tibet, as well as for scholars who want to access our work, which might not be accessible otherwise, except in the form of journal publications or books, etc. And I think Twitter has, academic Twitter has value in that.
Ma'am, as you said that your Twitter channel is 1 year old, but it has more than 700 followers. So my question is, how are the young Indians responding to this Twitter channel?
We do have attention from young Indian scholars who are willing, who wish to concentrate their research on Tibet. Most of these are, of course, within the university system. And we do have a number of people getting back to us through Twitter, asking us whether they could take their work forward through Tibetscapes. A lot of it currently is exploratory in nature. Dominantly, as I spoke earlier, work on Tibet tends to reflect Indian concerns about Tibet being a factor between India-China relations. But we are beginning to see some very interesting ideas from younger university scholars and students about looking at, for example, the foreign policy of Tibet. People wanting to do research on foreign policy of independent Tibet, or looking at anthropological studies of specific questions of geopolitics. The one thing which is, I think, very encouraging is that they are building more familiarity with Tibetan history. And we hope to be able to encourage more and more Indian students to do research on that, and not just Indian students for that matter, Tibetan students as well. I think this is an endeavor in which the interest of Tibetan students who are educated in the Indian university system is absolutely crucial and essential.
Ma'am, before we wind up our discussion, what are your guiding words for the upcoming young Indian researchers on Tibet?
I would say the most important aspect is familiarize yourself with Tibetan history beyond current concerns of geopolitics. Geopolitics changes, geography doesn't. India and Tibet are going to be next to each other forever. And to understand Tibet in such a narrow way as to look at Tibet only and only as an issue between India and China is, I think, counterproductive to building a very forward-looking and a very fruitful relationship with our largest neighbor in many manners of speaking. So I would say focus on Tibetan history, learn what are the historical lived experiences that India and Tibet have shared, and if possible, learn the Tibetan language.
Thank you so much. With this, we're going to end our discussion here. I would like to thank Professor Sonika Gupta ji for joining our program. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Ashila. My pleasure.